Okay, everybody, we're going to finish up lecture module 6, just continuing with the capital budgeting rules. And this is going to be a little shorter from that compared to that last video, so you don't have to buckle up for a long trip down this lane here. I did rule 7 last time, so we're going to do rule 8 now. Okay. Rule 8 is to recognize project interactions. And what we're going to do here, we'll consider a couple of different interaction possibilities. So let's do interaction number 1. And this is kind of a simplistic case, right? This would be mutually exclusive projects. So each of these projects has some economic lifespan, okay? And in this case, we're looking at them and thinking about them, which one should I choose? We know I choose, right, the alternative with the higher net present value. I might have to choose maybe if the project is compulsory. Maybe I choose the project with the lowest net present value. It might be one that has the ability to do some kind of cost minimization. That's when they have the same economic lifespan. That's this notion of highest versus lowest, or if it's compulsory. So there might be really what's going on here now is mutually exclusive projects, different lifespans, right? Different lifespans. So that's the case we're trying to look at now. Let's say you have A and B, projects A and B, okay, and they're mutually exclusive. And at time period 0, we can invest 10,000, okay? And let's say time period 1, the projects generate, say project A gives you 12,000, project B gives you 5. Go out to time period 2, project A generates nothing, so just nothing. Project B is giving you 5. Go to time period 3, and let's say nothing from A. Time period 3, let's say, okay, 5,000. And we can see the net present values of these projects, right? So it's $909 in A and $24.34 in B. Okay? So you look at these projects, you have a way to think about these, and you say, well, look, case 1 would be, regardless of the project I choose, maybe I'm getting out of the project in this way. Maybe I'm, finishing the business. So once the project's life is over, the business, let's say, is going to stop. Right. So if the business is going to stop, and that might be the case. It's just a temporary business project we're doing. So my business is right over after the project. What do? I'll take project B. That's a scenario that seems unlikely, though. That this notion that I'll probably cease business after the economic life of the asset and that I've got in this is over. It's unlikely, but of course it's a possibility, right? So think of case 2. Case 2, now regardless of the project you choose, let's say you plan to stay in business for some predetermined amount of time. Say you wanted to stay in business for for particularly in this case 3 years, regardless of the project. So project cash flows are now to be examined, and B lasts 3 years. You can see that. But A, right, has a longer time span that we need it to be operational through, right? So I got to change project A. So got these time periods. A runs me 10,000, remember, in outflow. And right, I need it to keep operating through these 3 future years here, right? So I'm going to invest again in time period 1, let's say 10,000. And then, right, I've got, remember, it only lasts 1 period beyond. I see it up here. It lasts 1 period beyond when I install it. So I've got to do it one more time. So I've got to go 10,000 here. Okay. So the outflows are running at 10 grand in each of those periods, and then I get plus, right, 12,000. So, and the project again makes another 12,000. Let's see. And then, right, it does it again. Makes 12,000. Now my net present value, right, runs with looking at, remember, in each time period I can create a net cash flow. So I've got minus 10,000 right there. Right? And then I have 2,000, and I have 2,000, and I have 12,000. So now I'm generating actually a net present value here. It's 2487. So see, project A has a net present value, right, that is greater than project B. So clearly my choice would be to install project A. Now, the lesson there is, right, you have some finite period of time perhaps, and you should follow a procedure that lets you do replacement of the mutually exclusive projects if they've got expired economic lives. That way you can examine the net present value across that finite time span for each situation that you have, right? Case 3, right, let's say you really assume that you're going to have a perpetual business. So you have a couple of options, really, well, 2 alternatives to think about this. The first alternative is what we call roll. We'll say roll the project cash flows forward. And the second option, I'll list it here first and then explain a little more. The second option we'll call it the equivalent, we're going to calculate an equivalent annual annuity. Equivalent annual annuity. So let's do the first situation. Call it option 1. Right, roll the cash flows forward. In this case, you're working through this rolling process till you have the least common denominator of the lifespans. So in our previous example, the lowest common denominator of a 1-year and a 3-year project is the 3 years, right? So you include all the relevant cash flows for those projects throughout that common length of lifespan for the projects. This was already done in that example above, and we were selecting project A. So we have the example already in place. And that works okay. Now when I looked at projects A and B, see what I did, I evaluated their cash flows across those 3 years, and that was no big deal. Now, here's the tricky part though, right? Suppose A has, let's say, an economic life of 7 years. And let's say B has an economic life of 11 years, right? So B has a life that's 11 years. Now, the lowest common denominator here for their lives, unfortunately, is 77 years. That's pretty tough to work with, right? You've got a lot of calculations to perform, all right? So that's why option 2 makes a little more sense, okay? So option 2 is to calculate the annual, we'll call it equivalent annual annuities. And then you select the best annuity that results here. The method's like this. It's calculating the net present value for a life cycle of each project. Okay? And the net present value for one life cycle then is converted to an annuity across the full life of the alternate project. See, the annuities of the alternatives are then comparable. Let's say that the projects we've got are both profit-enhancing projects. So you should select the option with the highest positive annuity. Okay. So if they're profitable projects, you got to say I'm going to select the highest equivalent annual benefit. Right? Profitable projects are beneficial. What if instead it's a cost minimization kind of process? So maybe the project is aimed at minimizing costs. So now you should select the option with the lowest negative annuity. That's the lowest annual cost. So let's say the equivalent annual cost is what you do. So you see, this is sort of giving us a tool which is a little more clear for a manager. It goes a little more precise than, say, when we were just looking at things in theory back in managerial economics. Now, the best way to examine this is through, let's just do a different example, okay? So in this case, my example needs a little bit of a setup. Let's say I've got two mutually exclusive machines and the revenues are equal. So you got these two mutually exclusive machines. And the revenues that flow are the same. Okay. Now, the costs of the two machines are different, though. So the costs are different. We'll also say their annual operating costs are different. So our annual operating costs differ. Fairly possible. And we'll also assume that the machines have different economic lives. And just for now, we'll ignore taxes. Okay, so we'll keep that as a simplifying step so we can focus our attention on this calculation work. So in this case, we're thinking about a cost minimization question. And we want to minimize then, right, the net present value of the cash outflows, right? Put that then as our goal. So we're going to minimize the net present value of these multi-period, multi-year lives of machines. And they have the same revenue, so that's not what is relevant for us, right? We want to know which one is going to be more profitable by way of the one that has the lowest equivalent annual cost, right? Let's say it's project X that has a 3-year life. Let's say it cost to install $10,000. And the annual operating costs are $6,000. And my other project is Y, let's say. So project Y. It's mutually exclusive to the other project. It has a 5-year life. It is, let's say it costs $20,000 with an annual operating cost, let's say, of $2,000. So if you look at these two options, you could draw a timeline and identify the relevant cash flows. And we're going to plan to be in business through the end of time, okay? So we want to see, you can see the lowest common denominator for the years of these two alternatives, right? The lowest common denominator is 15 years. So I'm not way up there at 77 years, but still it's a little bit unwieldy, right? So what I could do is discount the relevant cash flows over all 15 years for the alternatives, right? I could do that and then calculate NPVs. And the machine with the lowest net present value of the 15-year cash outflows for those first 15 years is my best choice. Or we could, of course, calculate the net present value of the options for one cycle of their economic lives. So let's assume the discount rate is 15%. Okay. So let's see if we can figure out what we should do. All right. So what you want to do is figure out the net present value of project X. So we'll call it NPVX. Okay. That has an outflow of 10,000. And we gotta see. Examine further outflows. Running years 1 through 3 of 6,000. And those are to be discounted at 1.15 raised to the t. Okay, so this actually generates a net present value of minus 24,000. Right, so that was, remember, just one cycle. We had 0 and we had 1, 2, 3. So we had minus 10,000, minus 6, remember? Minus 6, minus 6. So that's capturing the minus 10,000 here, right, in time period 0. And then, right, the cash flows in each of the time periods there. And then I'm going to discount them, right, by 1.15 raised to the first. Discount by 1.15 to the second, and then by 1.15 to the third, right? So the discount factor was here. So that's where I'm coming up with each stage of discounting through those time periods, okay? So minus 24,000. Then similarly, I can do the transformation of this 3-year project, right, into an annuity kind of format, okay? So the economic sort of tool comparison technique here is to take a equivalent annuity cost for project X, right? So NPVX is equal to 24,000, right? Outflows, so minus 24,000. And transform that into its equivalent annuity, okay? So it's only 3 years in its lifespan. So we go from T1 to 3. This is where I'm going to try to calculate EAC of X. Right, over 1.15 raised to the T. And when we solve for the equivalent annuity of the cost of X, that's the same thing we'll say. The 24,000 realized as, right, a net present value is the same thing as a general cash flow outflow of, right, 10,511. This is the amount of outlay at the end of each year for the 3 years, which has the same net present value as the actual cash flows that occur over its 3-year life, right? So this is time period 0 equivalent money flows in annuity terms, right? So then I say, well, let's do this. Find the net present value of Y. Project Y runs at minus 20,000 initially, right? And then I'm running for 5 years the operating costs for 5 years, and those are at minus 2,000 per year. That gives me a net present value of minus 27,000. Okay, and the EAC here, right? So you take the net present value of Y, that equals minus 27,000. Right. Make that run from time period 1 through 5 now to find its equivalent annuity cost of Y. And again, solve for, like I did up here, got to solve for the EAC of X here, solve for the EAC of Y. Right? So the equivalent annuity cost of project Y is an outflow of 8,055. And so now I see the annual outlay at the end of each year for 5 years. This is what's generating the same net present value as the actual cash flows for the project. So now you compare the cost of X and Y on this sort of common time denominator. This is now in the terms of a 1-year amount of an equivalent annuity. And let's say they could be incurred annually all the way out till the end of time. And this process gives us an NPV of the respective projects across an infinite time horizon. So you want to choose a lower cost case, right? So project Y has lower economic cost, right? Across a repetitive, infinitely lived business with this project being installed and reinstalled and so on across time, you want to choose Project Y, right? Project Y has lower costs. Remember, they both have the same revenue, so Project Y, therefore, will be more profitable. Now, you make this choice, even though Y has, really kind of a more negative one-cycle NPV than Project X. The reason why there's a different result here is because of the different economic lives of the project. And what we're doing is we're planning to replace the project over and over and over again. So we can't really do a simple single cycle of the net present values. Okay? So that, as I said, was the shorter ending point of the lectures dedicated to this introductory step dedicated to capital budgeting. So now you have some basic tools. I was going to potentially do replacement cycles, but I won't worry about that project. I'll just mention briefly, right, you might have project interactions with capital rationing, and that just involves a choice of certain projects, and you've got to realize that when you decide on a project, you potentially impact the choice of other projects. And that's also getting us into some complexities that probably I would set aside for a more advanced corporate finance text and a course. In the past, I would load that kind of topic, the capital rationing topic, coupled with the interactions into the course, and I think students generally got kind of lost on that topic. So it's something to be aware of, and that it will arise in your journey into the financial realm of business. But in terms of this course, I'm trying to set you up for success, and I don't want to throw too much at your way. That would be kind of rough going in our 8-week sequence. Okay, so let me put this one up on Blackboard for you all to consider.